Thanks all of you for coming, and I know that a lot of you have a lot also to bring to the discussions that we will have today in this afternoon on this important topic. And we are of course very happy to have the possibility to organize this seminar on the occasion of the visit by Gilbert Houngbo, who we have here, who is the newly elected president of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, as we call it, IFAD. And I was saying congratulations also, of course, to the appointment and most welcome to you. Mr. Houngbo was previously Prime Minister of Togo, and most recently he was the Deputy Director General of Field Operations and Partnerships at ILO. With its focus on the poorest and most marginalized rural populations, IFAD, and this we know in this room, plays a key role in its efforts to make the ambitions of the SDGs, of the Sustainable Development Goals, become reality. Not to leave anyone behind and make good use of all the possibilities that are there. Because we know also from experience that addressing rural poverty is fundamental if we are serious about eradicating poverty. And you also know that Sweden has been a strong and steadfast partner to IFAD. Swedish development cooperation has been and still is a very important part of the government work. And of course, this area has been an area where Sweden has worked for a long time. And this year, we are together with other donors negotiating the 11th replenishment to IFAD. And we hope that this will enable IFAD to scale up its important work for rural poor even further because of the importance that the organization in this area of work has. And we have also had the pleasure, which was very good, I think, to recently welcome IFAD, and that was in last December for the launch, the international launch of the Rural Development Report of 2016. And for those of you who have not yet read or taken part of this important report, I can warmly recommend it to you. In addition to President Houngbo, I'm very happy, of course, also to be joined here by an eminent panel of representatives from academia, from the private sector, and also from the Swedish farmers. And I'd like to welcome Ola Möller, who is a Senior Policy Specialist on Agriculture and Food Security at SIDA. Ylva Hillborn, who's the Vice Chancellor for International Relations at the Swedish University of Agricultural Science. And Katrin Löfberg, who's chairman at the board of a coffee company called Löfbergs Lila that we Swedes are well acquainted with. And Lennart Axel, who's international secretary at the Swedish Farmers Federation. And the agricultural economist Melinda Fons-Sundell will moderate this discussion, and you're sitting in the center of the table. So most welcome to you, and we're looking forward to hear more from you later on. I also would like to especially thank Madeleine Fogde and the Swedish International Agriculture Network Initiative, SIANI, a very active network for helping us to organize this seminar. So I mentioned the important role that IFAD has moving words into action with regard to the new goals for sustainable development today. But the topic of the seminar today is also a good reminder of the important role that agriculture and rural development has in addressing our generation's most important challenge, that is the managing of climate change. I think that this seminar will present a very important and valuable opportunity for discussing the pressing issues of how rural development can lead to greater resilience. We need to look at the challenges, but also then, of course, at the opportunities that this area can bring. Because we know that the current events in East Africa show all too clearly how drought in combination with also unrest and conflict leads to famine. And we have seen how an estimated 20 million people are currently in serious danger of starvation in Africa and not least in Yemen. With the effects of climate change becoming more severe with time, we risk more crises of this kind in the coming years. And you know Sweden and our development cooperation that we have many times taken lead in humanitarian response. And we are also doing this now, including the action that we take in Security Council, where we have also started to relate climate-related risks to security, and thus also in relation to development and development cooperation and the role we need to play with that. But we need to see that the response cannot only be humanitarian, even though it is so important to see how we can improve our humanitarian action. We need to see how we can change our action to avoid similar humanitarian crises in the future. Build on the experience that we have and important institutions as IFAD and other knowledgeable people have to see how we can improve our action. And in this context, rural development, agricultural development, climate smart agriculture not least, and resilient rural societies are part of the solution. They create society which are much more resistant to effects of climate change through adaptation. And we know that the majority of extremely poor live in rural areas, and we know that many of them will also live in conflict. They already live, and more of them will live in conflict-ridden areas. And they are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And if done right, we believe that investment in climate-smart development of rural areas can really help mitigate climate change and create much more stable societies that are less vulnerable to become polarized and therefore conflict-prone, which is another major drive of food insecurity and poverty. So it goes in circles. Sustainable resource management to avoid conflict over resources and the empowerment of women, of course, you know that we have a feminist foreign policy with a feminist government. These are all necessary aspects of prosperous rural communities. And achieving this is, of course, challenging, but discussions, I believe, such as this, where we make good use of the knowledge that we have and have gained over the years of cooperation, can really make us think better and improve our action, as I was saying. And once again, I would like to thank IFAD and also the panelists, because I believe that you will help us to move further on in our thinking, but also in our action. So looking forward to listening to this. Thank you very much, and once again, most welcome.
Thank you so much, Excellency, State Secretary Mode, and all the distinguished panelists, members, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a great honor for us, all my colleagues and myself, to be here today. So I really would like to thank the minister and the whole SIANI colleague in organizing this event. I also would like to thank colleagues that I've met. I'm meeting again here in Sweden. I was here last November, so it was also a pleasure for me to be back. Obviously, the weather in November is not the same as in August, so you're still enjoying the last week of summer. It's important for me to start by recalling that Sweden, for us, is a founding member of IFAD, and he has been cooperating with us for the past 40 years, as the State Secretary has clearly mentioned it in our drive to eliminate the rural poverty. As most of you will know, despite huge progress in recent decades, we still have estimated 767 million people living in extreme poverty, i.e. Below the $1.90 per day. And 4 out of 5 live in rural areas. Most of these children, women and men depend upon rain-fed agriculture for their lives and their livelihoods. They grow crops, they raise animals, catch fish, forest, provide services to farmers, or work in food processing. Climate change is one of the biggest risks we all know that they face in today's world. Unless we tackle this now, collectively, it will undermine the well-being of farmers and push an estimated another 100 million people into poverty by 2030. Rising average temperatures around the world are disrupting weather systems. They reduce rainfall in some areas and increase it in others. Climate change also brings more extreme weather, much more too often. And it is a grave and worsening threat to food production by many of the world's poorest people. Every 1 degree rise reduces cereal yields by about 5%. And by 2012, temperatures has risen almost 1 degree since, we all know, since 1880. The consequence of climate change cannot be overstated, especially against a backdrop of population growth, as is the case in most of Africa and Asia. The combination of more people and disrupted food supply is potentially catastrophic. It's not just farmers who are at risk. It is the entire nation. The world 500 million small farmers provide up to 80% of the food produced in many developing countries in Africa and Asia. If food production fails, then they face a stark choice. Either they can migrate or they can compete with neighboring communities to access food, or they can risk starvation. Of course, few people really want to leave their homes. It's important to keep that in mind. Leaving the families, the friends, the culture, and the heritage to trek hundreds or thousands of kilometers. What they really want is to be able to adapt to climate change. What they really want is to improve the food security and enhance the quality of life and the prospects for their families, the children, and of course the grandchildren. But to do that, that requires resilience. When people are resilient, they are able to bounce back from crisis, from flood, drought, from conflict, or job losses, or the breakdown of local institutions. Yet, according to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, natural disasters have already adversely affected millions of people since 2000 and cost the global economy more than $2.5 trillion US. In this context, IFAD is working to foster climate-resistant agriculture and ensure rural people everywhere to ensure that they have an adequate, nutritionally sound diet with a special focus on women and other disadvantaged groups. Women are 43% of the agricultural workforce worldwide. Unfortunately, they are too often among the most disadvantaged members of their societies. Even when given equivalent resources, women farmers in sub-Saharan Africa are held back by hidden constraints and inequalities.